Good evening and welcome. Tonight we're going to be going over the history and geography of Iceland. Kind of a weird angle because of my map, but this is a really great map of Iceland. Let me show you. Let me get my pencil, of course. Iceland, as you can see, is an island. It's in the very northernmost Atlantic Ocean. And you can see the Greenland Sea up here, and this line up here is the Arctic Circle. It's just above the Arctic Circle. There's actually this island up here called Grimsey, which is the only part of Iceland that's above the Arctic Circle. So as you can imagine, Iceland, based on its name and location, is very icy, very cold, and also very mountainous and incredibly volcanically active. And that's because it's centered on a very interesting part of the globe. It's right in the middle of the North American plate and the Eurasian plate. And the split, you can almost kind of see it on this map, is right down here, and then it splits down here as well. So you can see the big mountains down here on either side, right down through there. These two plates are pulling apart, which creates a lot of geothermal activity like volcanoes and geysers, earthquakes, all of those wonderful seismic things. So as you can imagine, Iceland actually has more volcanoes on it than any other country. Let's see, let's start down in this corner, going through its geography. This is where most of the population of Iceland lives and where the capital city of Reykjavik is located. There's also a very important part of Icelandic history in this area. You can see this lake right here. This is Thingvallavatn, and right up here is the Thingvellir National Park. And we'll talk about that more in depth in its history, why that's so important. Down here in the southern region is not very populated because there's lots of ice and mountains down here. Also some islands. There's a little island chain down here called the Westman Islands. And it's actually home to the newest land on the planet. This island down here is Surtsey, just erupted from the ocean in 1963. And to this day, people aren't really allowed on there. Only scientists are to study the plant life and birds and insects, rocks, things like that. Discovering how life comes to be on these kinds of islands. Down here, the land is dominated by this big park and volcanic area, the Vatnajökull National Park. Stretches all the way up here. Up here is also where we have the highest point in Iceland, right here. It is Mount Fanadalshnúkur. And a note about Icelandic, it being one of the most complicated languages in the world. I've been practicing. I think I'm okay, not great. But if you know Icelandic, or if you're from Iceland, please feel free to correct any of my pronunciation. I'm sure it's all terribly wrong, but it's far better than where I was like a week ago, believe me. The longest river is also located here. It's right here. It flows down there. It's called the Thorsá River. In the north is mostly just fishing villages up here. And it's also where we find the largest city outside of the whole Reykjavik area, right here at Akureyri. And in this part of Iceland, in the west fjords, up here, obviously there are many, many fjords. This area isn't as populated as the other sort of less populated parts of Iceland. It's mostly just fishing villages. But it's stunning. This is the Hornstrandir Peninsula. It's very barren, very rocky, obviously full of fjords. In my opinion, this is the most beautiful place in Iceland, and all of Iceland is absolutely beautiful. Iceland, as you can tell, has very, very interestingly named places, but once you kind of learn a bit of Icelandic, you learn why they have these very long, strange names, like Vik means bay, which is how we get Reykjavik. Jökull means volcano. I believe it's either volcano or mountain. I'm pretty sure it's volcano. The A at the end of the islands means island. So like Surtsey, there's Heimaey. What else? Oh, Grimsey, yeah. Things like that. Like everything's very literal in lots of aspects of Icelandic naming, from the names of places to the names of the people. So it's very clever actually once you figure out why things are named the way they are in Iceland. The Icelandic people also are very, very interesting. Iceland always rates high on any kind of happiness index. It's the place with the lowest crime rate in the world. Iceland's most famous for Bjrk, the very eccentric musician who has one of the best unintentional ASMR videos where she takes apart a TV. I'll link it in the description below if you haven't seen it. I find it so calming and relaxing and so soothing to watch. There's something about the Icelandic accent that is so good for ASMR, and there are so few Icelandic ASMR artists out there. If you're considering doing ASMR and you're Icelandic, please do, because your accent is so, so soothing. I was thinking the other day, like, what are my favorite accents? And I realized that it was Icelandic, Swedish, Russian, and Korean. So there's something about that part of the globe. I don't know what it is. Like, to me, those are the most relaxing accents. So please, Icelandic people, make more ASMR because your accent is so beautiful to hear. It's so calming when it's spoken nice and gentle and soothingly. I know typically Icelandic people are very loud. If you're not subscribed to her, Morgis is one of my favorite YouTubers, and in my opinion, one of the most naturally funny people in the world. Her comedy is just so perfect, and so she's hysterical. But turn down your volume whenever she has a new video. I hit the volume to its lowest setting before I click play. There's also the Cousin Oscar video, which was kind of a meme back in the day. But yeah, that's what I think of whenever I think of Iceland. I think of Björk, of Monsters and Men, and Morgis. She's hysterical. But let's go through its history and figure out how Icelandic people came to be how they are today. So, Iceland is very, very famous for its Vikings, right? Let me put this down for a second. But the first people to actually live on Iceland were not Vikings. They were either Irish or Scottish monks, and they spent their summers on Iceland between the year 770 and 880, so they could have a quiet place to pray, like their own private island just for solitude. But once the Vikings arrived, they obviously stopped coming. And there's not a lot of archaeological evidence about it, but there is some out there. One of their houses has been found, but they didn't really leave any kind of anything behind to really prove why they were actually there or how long they would stay for, so that's pretty much all we know about them. The first person to sail completely around Iceland was Garðr Sverrisson in 870. He attempted to build a little town in Iceland, but once winter hit, he gave up. The first person to come and permanently settle in Iceland was Ingolf Arnason, who in 874 established the city of Reykjavik. And then it was over here, I told you we'd talk about this, in 930, the Althing was established, or the Althingi. So what is the Althing? Althingi. It is the world's oldest currently existing parliament. It still exists to this day. There was a brief period between 1800 and 1845 where it was abolished. We'll talk about that. But it's still around today. But obviously during Viking times it was very, very different. So what they would do is that they would meet over here in the Thingvellir, right there, plain along the lake here. And there's a rock over here that was known as the Law Rock. And they would start off their meetings by, so there were people that would memorize 1/3 of all the laws in Iceland, basically. And they'd have 3 meetings a year, so they'd each get a turn. They would stand on top of the Law Rock, and they would recite 1/3 of all the laws that they had memorized by heart. And anyone was allowed to attend these meetings, but they were all attended by the heads of all the clans. So even if you couldn't read, you could be up to date on all of the laws and how things functioned in Iceland. And then all of the chiefs and whoever could air out their grievances or discuss issues, and then they would be basically voted on and resolved there as well. So it was, in a nutshell, a full-on parliament meeting, just done very old school, I suppose. I don't know how to describe it. One of the things that they agreed on in either the year 999 or 1000 was to establish Christianity as the main religion in Iceland, which it still is to this day, with the caveat that anyone is allowed to practice whatever religion they want. But Christianity is still the official religion of Iceland. The Vikings were really into their Norse mythology for quite a while, even after the agreement to accept Christianity. But it all kind of fell apart in the 1200s with this whole drama with the Sturlungs, or the Sturlungi family. Many chieftains, particularly in that family, were very overbearing. Disagreements would happen. There were murders. There were assassinations. Many arguments. It was essentially almost a civil war, but without an army. And that was resolved in 1262 when the chieftains went to the King of Norway and said, "You gotta help us out. Everything's falling apart." And they signed what was called the Old Covenant, which allowed Norway to have authority over Iceland. But in 1415, we have the Kalmar Union, which I talked about in my videos on Sweden and Norway, which was when Denmark, Sweden, and Norway formed to make one big country called the Kalmar Union. Therefore, Iceland became part of it. And since Denmark basically controlled the Kalmar Union, that means Denmark basically controlled Iceland and would for quite a long time. But this would lead to a huge, how should I put this nicely? A very bleak time in Icelandic history. In particular, in this period, between 1402 and 1404, the Black Death came to Iceland and killed over half of the population. It was pretty bad. In the 16th century, Denmark got swept up in the Protestant Reformation and became Lutheran and imposed Lutheranism on Iceland, which there was some pushback, but the Danes pushed back harder. So still as of today, the official religion is the Lutheran form of Christianity in Iceland. And it's between this time and modern times where things got real bad in Iceland. Many really terrible things happened. There were, of course, your volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, natural disasters, freezing cold winters, landslides, all of those just typical environmental things that happen when you live in this part of the world. But also some interesting events. In 1627, some pirates came and kidnapped a bunch of people and sold them as slaves. Yikes. They had a smallpox epidemic that wiped out 1/3 of the population. But honestly, the very worst thing, in my opinion, was the eruption of the Laki volcano in 1783. So this volcano not just erupted and destroyed whole towns once it erupted, it also created some cracks in the earth, and from those fissures, lots of toxic gas spewed out from the earth and killed, I think it was 80% of the cattle and livestock on Iceland. It killed, I think, another 40 to 50% of the population. And that gas, mixed with all of the natural elements that spew out from volcanoes and go up into the atmosphere, did damage to the rest of the world. That gas killed people along the coast of Great Britain. The combination of those gases in the air led to one of the coldest winters in North American history, and the United States had just formed at this time, so that led to a lot of hardship on top of the economic hardship they were already dealing with. It led to severe drought in some parts of the world. Like, it led to the Nile River not flooding as much as it did, which led to, famine and drought. It had a massive drought in India. Japan had, they were already going through a famine. It made the famine 10 times worse. It just, affected many parts of the world. But definitely got Iceland the worst. So the people of Iceland, many people were leaving also at this time, moving on to like America and other parts of the world. But it was a moment where Iceland either had to do something or it was going to just collapse. So a nationalism movement sprung up. They went to Denmark. Also, it was around this time where the Althing was abolished and they convinced Denmark to let them have it back. Denmark allowed them to create a constitution in 1874, allowed them to start electing their own officials in the early 1900s, and in 1918 they created the Danish-Icelandic Act of Union, which allowed Iceland to govern itself with the Danish authority acting over them for 25 years. And after 25 years, the people would vote to see if they wanted full independence or if they wanted to continue being controlled by Denmark. Oh, you know what I didn't mention was one of the other unfortunate things that happened was that Denmark controlled all of their imports and exports. So when Denmark was going through hard times, particularly the Napoleonic Wars, which they sided with Napoleon and suffered a massive defeat, that also led to a lot of famine and lack of resources in Iceland, because as you can see, Iceland doesn't really have a lot of arable land for farming, so most of their food was dependent on exports. So, while there was a big push for independence, it was a little worrisome because they had been so dependent on Denmark for so long. But all of that changed very drastically in 1940 when Nazi Germany invaded Denmark, basically cutting off Iceland from the rest of the world. So Great Britain came in just over a month later, I think, and occupied the island for a few reasons. One was so that the Germans couldn't get a hold of it, and two, because of its position in the Atlantic Ocean. Scotland is not far from here. So since Britain had many other things to do than occupy Iceland, they allowed the United States to come in and just supervise. Iceland and Denmark had declared neutrality at the start of the war, and so had the United States. So the United States set up bases here and just kind of watched over and made sure nothing happened up here, which thankfully nothing really did. And the United States military actually stayed here for a long time, kind of on and off, but their last military base closed in 2006. They were there for quite a while, just supervising. So the 25-year period ended in 1944. The Icelandic people put it to a vote, and they voted for independence. So Iceland became independent on June 17th, 1944. And let's go over some aspects of modern Icelandic history, and then I'm going to change the angle and flip through this book for you. In 1949, Iceland joined NATO, which was very controversial. Many people in Iceland were against it. And in my opinion, that really led to a lot of opposition to joining any sort of extremely political organizations around the world, other than like the UN, of course. But at one point recently, Iceland put in a petition to join the EU, which many Icelandic people were opposed to. There were like protests and all of that, so they put that to a referendum. It was voted to not join the EU. The next prime minister, department, all of that, withdrew their nomination from the EU. Little things like that. So in the 1970s, the Cod Wars happened. Not the Cold Wars, the Cod Wars, which was when Iceland pushed to extend their fishing territories, which was basically into British fishing territory. It was essentially kind of a Cold War, mainly because Iceland doesn't have a military to actually fight, but there were a lot of debates, a lot of arguments on both sides. Fishing boats rammed into each other. It was quite a lot, but Iceland wound up essentially winning the whole argument and getting to extend their fishing zones, and there's some zones where Britain and Iceland can fish together. There is a lot of compromises. In 2010, we had the eruption of Eyjafjallajökull, this big volcano right here. It created a big cloud of ash that spread over the whole North Atlantic and interrupted flights basically from like North America to Europe, Europe to North America. Any kind of flight leaving the UK or Scandinavia was completely disrupted for about a month or so. Really put Iceland into the national scene once again. Mainly because, not just the whole flight disruption thing, but the bizarre name of the volcano. There's lots of interesting compilation videos of people trying to say the name of the volcano. I'm sure I'm saying it wrong, but like I said at the start, I have been practicing and I'm much better than I was a week ago, even if I am terrible now. Iceland has always been pretty liberal in terms of policies and elections. They were the first country to elect a female head of state. And in 2009, they elected Jóhanna Sigurðardóttir, who became the first LGBT head of state, or at least the first openly LGBT head of state, at least. In 2003, Iceland really started to really invest in banking and worked on the privatization of their banks, which at the time was very profitable for Iceland's economy, really boosted it. But in 2008, they were hit very, very hard by the recession. Out of the many countries that were hit hard by the recession, Iceland was hit pretty much one of the hardest. Their whole economy nearly collapsed, and in my opinion, they did the right thing by jailing the bankers that were responsible for their economic issues instead of giving more money to the banks and in the hopes of fixing it. They gave money to the people and jailed those who were responsible. Quite a concept. But another issue was in 2016 when their Prime Minister, Sigmundur Davíð Guðmundsson, apologies for that, Gesundheit, was implicated in the Panama Papers scandal, which was basically a leak of private bank accounts among very prominent people around the world. That led him to resign, and Iceland had to have a snap election. You know, all those things when your head of state has to suddenly resign in disgrace. But other than that, that's pretty much where Iceland is at today. It's very progressive. I mean, kind of jolly is one of the words I would use to describe Iceland. One of those where something like a volcanic eruption is just another day. It's just like Tuesday, you know. There's suddenly a lava flow up on the hills or whatever. It's just, oh, that just happens. It's a place that I definitely have to go someday. It's so beautiful and so different and unique. So let's take a look at some pictures in here and I'll show you what I mean. All right, welcome back to my usual angle. You can see little Iceland here. Let's flip through the book. Iceland. Here's a cool picture of the largest church in Iceland. It's a Lutheran church, and it's called Helgrimskirkja. At least I hope so. Let's see what we have here. Little fishing village. Lots of little fishing boats there, and a big old sailboat over here. A political map of Iceland. You can see all the big cities over here. Some of the little fishing villages up here. Here's a fishing boat. And this guy's checking his fishing nets. This is a Nobel Prize winning author from Iceland, Halldór Laxness. Getting some fishies and eating some fishies. Big pot of potatoes there. Don't forget your ketchup. So this is Eyjafjallajökull. When it erupted in 2010, look at all the clouds of ash and smoke. It's really pretty. Almost looks like a painting. Really, really pretty. But, yeah, disrupted the world for a minute. This is Mount Laki. As you can see, some of the cracks here that developed because of that huge eruption where the gas spewed out from. Here's a map of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. So you can see the North American plate and the Eurasian plate pulling apart and creating a chain of volcanoes. I don't think there's any pictures in here, but there's some actual like physical areas where like the land's actually coming apart and you can see it. It's really interesting. But here's a physical map of Iceland. You can see all the mountains, all the rivers. It's really beautiful. Look at this. So this is in 1973 on Heimaey, the little islands down there, the Westman Islands. So like this is all lava that engulfed the town. This is a roof of a house. These are roofs. So yeah, that can happen when you live on an incredibly volcanically active island. See, here's what I'm talking about when I say that. That big peninsula of Iceland is so beautiful. And Iceland is very barren because of the Vikings. So Iceland used to be covered in birch forest, and the Vikings chopped them all down to make their houses and light fires and things like that. And they did so swiftly and voraciously that today only 1% of Iceland is forested. So of course there are many movements to plant more trees and regrow the forests, but yeah, that's what happens when you wipe down an entire forest. And look at this, one of the cliffs up in the fjords. So beautiful. Lots and lots of birds nest in here. That's what all this white is. It's bird poopies. Some of the beautiful waterfalls in Iceland. I think this is the largest. Yeah, Dettifoss. There's like countless waterfalls in Iceland. And here is a river. This is the Olafsá River, which is created from a glacier flow. And here is Thingvallavatn, the largest lake in Iceland. And the largest glacier is, of course, Vatnajökull. Maybe Jökull means glacier. Anyway. Let's see, this is Koppavogur, a suburb of Reykjavik. This would be Akureyri, along the sea there. And this is another suburb of Reykjavik. It's Hafnarfjordur. A big geyser erupting. There is a big geyser field. Let's see if I can point it out on here. Right about, you can see Hafnarfjordur over here. It would be, I'm sideways. Around here would be the geyser area. And then, of course, the beautiful Aurora Borealis. So beautiful. Look at this lady in the rain, walking her dogs. Just like Cousin Oscar. It says it rains 148 days of the year. Here's a chart of daylight in Reykjavik. So you can see in January they have a little under 5 hours, But by June, July, they have just over 20 hours of daylight. A puffin. Iceland has lots and lots and lots of puffins. So many puffins. See, oh, it says right here, Iceland's home to 60% of the world's puffins. So cute. This is a great auk. It was a bird that went extinct on Iceland because they were hunted for their meat and their eggs. Here's another bird. It's a red-throated diver getting a fishy. Here's the Bjrk, the national bird of Iceland. And a lovely little harbor seal. Another example of the beautiful fields out there. Little wildflowers growing. Iceland, despite being called Iceland, isn't 100% ice. You can see all this beautiful green, and that's because of the Gulf Stream flowing from like the Gulf of Mexico and Caribbean, flowing up the Atlantic, warming the area a little more than that area on the other side of the world in the Pacific. The national flower, so pretty. Let's see, it's the Mountain Avens? Mountain Avens? I'm not sure. I don't know that flower. Mushrooms, which grow all over Iceland, basically. And Vatnajökull National Park. Isn't that gorgeous? So stunning. Here's a statue of Ingólfur Arnason. And here's his trip around, at least the southern coast of Iceland. And he settled here in Reykjavik. Here's a drawing of him settling in Reykjavik, which in the video tomorrow I'll talk about how and why he picked the spot he did to establish Reykjavik. Here's what a typical house would look like during Viking times in Iceland, with their sod roofs. I think it's really pretty. Viking voyages. So I just did a whole video on Leif Erikson, one of the more famous Vikings. His father, Eric the Red, discovered Greenland, so he sailed out from Iceland and established a little settlement in Greenland too. And Leif Erikson explored the North American coast, established a little town in Newfoundland, which lasted about 20 years or so. And as we know, it was the first European to reach North America. And here's Eric the Red. You can really see why he was called the Red. And here is a book by Snorri Sturluson, who was one of those people involved in the whole like Viking Civil War era. But he was a writer and a poet, and he wrote many famous stories that are still beloved to this day. He was murdered during the whole hubbub of the drama that was going on, the hot tea in Iceland. A little church. Look at the sod roof. Isn't it cute? That's adorable. Here's a depiction of fishers in Reykjavik. Reykjavik in 1800. You can see the sod roofs here on the houses and see kind of how bleak life was there. Let's see. Oh, this is the Battle of Copenhagen, which was the big naval defeat of Denmark in the Napoleonic Wars. This is Jon Sigurdsson, who led to the Althing getting reestablished and like kind of put the wheels in motion for Iceland's independence. Here are the Americans in Iceland during World War II. You can see the American flag there. Picture from the Cod Wars. 2 boats being very tense. Here is Vigdis Finnbogadóttir, who was the first female head of state in Iceland and the first female head of state in the world, with Margaret Thatcher, the first female head of state in Great Britain. This is the Althing building today. I'll show you a picture of what it looks like in the actual room coming up. A little protest going on. Does it say? It doesn't say what it is, but I always say your democracy is working if your people can peacefully protest. You know, protests are a good thing in my opinion. Let's see, this is Johannes Sigurðardóttir, who was, like I said, the first openly LGBT head of state in the world. This is the Althing room. So, Compared to other countries, this is extremely small, but you know, it is Iceland. They don't have a very large population and they can fit all their representatives in one big room. I think it's I think it's cool. Iceland's so neat. Look at this parade. This is the Supreme Court building. Very icy looking. And here's the flag. Let me read about it to you. It says, Iceland's flag features an off-center cross called a Scandinavian cross. The cross is red with a white outline against a field of blue. Blue represents the sea on which Icelanders have sailed for generations, and white stands for Iceland's many glaciers. The red is both a link to Norway and a reminder that the land was formed from the fires of erupting volcanoes. The flag was adopted in 1915. Some more pictures of Reykjavik. And here's the other side of that big church at the very beginning of this book. A little map of downtown Reykjavik. Some sheepies. There's always sheep in these books. But sheep are a big aspect of cattle in Iceland. Let me talk about this in a second. Because of their wool and also because of their meats, you know, lamb and mutton and all of that. This is a power plant, so Iceland relies really, really heavy on natural energy. They have all of that steam and things going on, so hydropower is pretty well utilized. Hydroelectric power as well. And yeah, this is Svartsengi power plant, using water from underground to warm a spot, or something. Anyway, this is the Icelandic krona, their currency. There's a fish factory, fish processing, and a resources map, so you can really see that they can only really grow stuff in this area, a little bit up here. Everything else is agriculture and fish. And some mining. You know, you get like pumice and things like that when you have a volcanic island. Here's an example of their woolly sweaters they make from their sheepies. Looks very cozy. Icelandic horses are also very iconic in Iceland. Such beautiful little guys. Riding their bike. Let's see. Population density map of Iceland. You can see pretty much everyone lives in this part and a little bits up here. Not so much in any other part of Iceland due to the ice and the glaciers and things like that. Brightly colored buildings. Isn't it beautiful? Very Nordic, isn't it? Having fun on the playground. There's another gorgeous waterfall. And boiling water. Apparently, one of the issues with tourists in Iceland is that they keep touching the water and having to go to the hospital with burns on their hands. Going on a field trip, preschool. I was about to say, I guess I'll do let's make a rope 1, 2, 3. Everyone hold on to me. You walk down the road together, go on little field trips. Jump rope is the best playground game, in my opinion. Really fun. This is the University of Iceland and students studying hard. A beautiful church interior. That's lovely. I like the colors. This is a Catholic church, the largest Catholic church in Iceland. So very beautiful. Here's some Lutheran priests and typical church service. And some graves that are decorated for Christmas. Icelanders have some really interesting Christmas traditions. We'll talk more about it as I flip through. Like right here, parades are a common thing during Christmas. And these are the Yule lads. There's 13 of them, and they're the ones that leave presents. Each one has their own weird little personality. They're kind of wacky. It's an interesting tradition. Here's some dressing up for Christmas. That looks so cool. I wish we did costumes during Christmas here in America. Like handmade ones, you can tell. That's so fun. There's Odin, the Norse like head god, with his wife Frigg. Here is the coat of arms of Iceland, which is based on, let me just read this to you. It says, according to an ancient legend, King Harald of Denmark sent a magician to explore Iceland. The magician arrived in Icelandic waters in the form of a whale. He saw that spirits with many powers overwhelmed the land. He went to Vopnafjörður in the east, where he met a huge dragon. To the north, in Eyjafjörður, he came upon a bird so large that its wings spread from one mountain peak to another. In the south, in Breiðafjörður, a huge bull waded into the sea to stop the magician's approach. In the region of Reykjavik, he came upon a rock giant. These spirits protected Iceland from King Harald, and each is depicted in Iceland's national coat of arms. That's a great story. There's a big troll ready to eat some kids, which I just did a video on trolls. Very interesting little folk tales about those guys. Let's see who this is. It says it's, Heimdall, the watchman of the gods, blowing his horn. Some sagas from ancient Iceland and one of their old books that have been preserved. We know a lot about ancient Norse mythology because of many Icelandic writers who wrote down all the stories and legends. Let's see some authors. We have Almar Dríðadsson and Steinunn Sigurðardóttir. Beautiful bookstore. And this is an author named Sion. Not positive about his pronunciation, but it says he's written novels, poetry, and children's books. Some very beautiful Icelandic art. Isn't that lovely? That's really pretty. Take a look up close here. Lots of little details. Looks like it's glass. Doesn't say, but it's really pretty. Bjrk, who on this channel we forever stan. I'm not going to tolerate any Bjrk hate. Any Bjrk hate will automatically be deleted. We love Bjrk here. Here's Sigur Rós, which is a really popular Icelandic band. We've got some fun sledding times over here. And this is Icelandic wrestling. You see they grab these belts and hurl each other around. In the hot spring with some natural mud on their faces. I bet that feels so nice. This is Hulkcarl. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but it sounds disgusting. It's meat from this poisonous shark that they chop up and bury the meat in the sand and let it rot. And once it's starting to really rot, they dry it out like jerky. It sounds disgusting. It's basically rotted meat that they eat. And it's not poisonous after they let it rot. So anyway, there's a bunch of sheepies making some hay, playing some chess, big chess, playing outside, beautiful scenery. This is Skeer, which is a staple food in Iceland. It's eaten for breakfast pretty much every day. It's eaten with breakfast, I should say. It's kind of like a cream cheese or a cottage cheese. It's a cheese. And you can put all kinds of like berries and things mixed in with it. You can make it a bunch of different ways, but it's eaten every day in Iceland. Let's see what else we have. Oh, we're almost done. Last page, we've got cafe and the outside of a cafe. Look how beautiful. Oh, I love buildings in Iceland, but yeah, that is the end. So that's where I'll leave you for tonight. Here we go. Thank you so much for watching. I'll have another nice long video about Iceland for you tomorrow, and then we're going to jet off to other parts of the world. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. Thank you so much for watching. Have a very good night. guy on his bike. He comes around midnight every night on his bicycle, blasting some kind of loud music. Literally every single night. I mean, when you have a thing, you just go for it, just embrace it. If that's your thing, then that's your thing.